Have you ever felt that desperate urge to chase after someone who's walking away? That overwhelming compulsion to send another text, make another call, explain yourself one more time? When someone we care about pulls away, our instinct is to reach out and grab hold, to do everything possible to bring them back. But what if I told you that the most powerful thing I ever did to get her back was nothing at all? Think about it. In a world where we're constantly told to hustle, to pursue, to make things happen, the idea of doing nothing seems completely counterintuitive. It feels wrong. It feels like giving up. But sometimes, the space between doing everything and doing nothing is where the real magic happens. I want to talk about a pattern I've noticed, both in my own life and in the lives of so many people I've spoken with. A pattern where the harder we chase, the faster they run. Where every message we send pushes them just a little bit further away. Where our desperate attempts to fix things only break them beyond repair. When she first left, I was devastated. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I felt that crushing weight in my chest, that constant knot in my stomach, that overwhelming sense of loss that made it hard to even get out of bed in the morning. And my first instinct, like so many of us, was to fix it, to chase, to convince, to win her back through sheer force of will and persistence. I sent the texts, I made the calls, I wrote the letters, I showed up, I explained myself over and over again. I promised to change. I did everything that seemed logical, everything that seemed necessary, everything that my panicked heart was telling me to do. And it didn't work, not even a little bit. In fact, it made things worse. With each desperate attempt at connection, I could feel her pulling further away. Each explanation was met with more resistance. Each promise of change was met with more skepticism. Each attempt to close the distance between us only served to widen it. Meishu, why is that? Why does pursuing someone who's pulling away so often push them further? The answer lies in understanding something fundamental about human psychology and relationships. When someone chooses to step back from a relationship, they're creating space for a reason. Sometimes that reason is clear and articulated, but often it's complex, confusing, and not fully understood even by them. They're trying to gain perspective, to breathe, to think without the emotional intensity that close proximity brings. And when we chase after them, we're essentially saying that we don't respect their need for that space. Moreover, our desperate pursuit can actually confirm whatever doubts or concerns led them to pull away in the first place. If they left because they felt smothered, our constant texts only prove their point. If they left because they questioned our emotional stability, our frantic calls only reinforce those fears. If they left because they weren't sure of their feelings, our pressure for reassurance only confuses them further. I realized this the hard way. Exhausted from chasing, depleted from trying, I finally collapsed into doing nothing. Not as a strategy, not as a manipulation tactic, but simply because I had nothing left to give. I had reached the end of myself, the end of my efforts, the end of my ideas. And in that empty space, something unexpected began to happen. First, I started to breathe again. Without the constant focus on winning her back, on saying the right thing, on fixing what was broken, I was forced to sit with myself, to feel my own feelings, to confront my own issues that had contributed to our breakdown, to remember who I was before the relationship and who I might become after it. This wasn't easy. Sitting with pain never is. But in that stillness, I found clarity. I began to see patterns in our relationship that hadn't been healthy. I began to understand why she needed space. I began to recognize that my desperate attempts to pull her back were more about my fear of being alone than about genuine love and respect for her needs. And something else happened too. Without the pressure of my constant pursuit, she had space to feel her own feelings, to miss me if she was going to miss me, to remember what was good about us, if there was good to remember, to come to her own conclusions in her own time without the noise of my desperation. This is what I mean by doing nothing. It's not about playing games or executing some manipulative strategy. It's about respecting the other person's autonomy and their need for space. It's about having enough faith in what you had together to let it either find its way back or not, on its own terms. It's about loving someone enough to let them go, and loving yourself enough to be okay regardless of the outcome. So what happened? Did she come back? Yes, she did, but not because of anything I did. She came back because she chose to, because she had the space to make that choice freely and without pressure. She came back because she missed what we had, not because I convinced her to return. She came back because in my silence, she could finally hear her own heart. But here's the thing. This story isn't really about getting her back. It's about what I learned in the process, what I gained by doing nothing. Even if she hadn't returned, the lessons would have been just as valuable. I learned that chasing after someone who's pulling away is like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more slips through your fingers. I learned that true connection can't be forced, manipulated, or coerced. It must be freely given and freely received. I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Now, I want to be clear about something. Doing nothing doesn't mean disappearing without a word. It doesn't mean playing mind games or trying to make someone jealous. It doesn't mean refusing to have necessary conversations when they arise. And it definitely doesn't mean waiting around in suspended animation for someone to decide they want you again. Doing nothing means giving them the space they have asked for, directly or indirectly. It means focusing on your own healing and growth rather than monitoring their every move. It means accepting that you cannot control another person's feelings or decisions, no matter how much you want to. It means trusting that what's meant to be will find its way, and what's not meant to be will fall away, regardless of how tightly you try to hold on. During my time of doing nothing, I rebuilt myself. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected. I rediscovered hobbies I'd abandoned. I addressed issues that had been festering within me long before the relationship even began. I became stronger, more centered, more at peace with myself and my life. And ironically, it was this version of me, not the desperate, pleading, chasing version that she was drawn back to. It was the man who had found his own center again, who had remembered his own worth, who had created a life he loved regardless of whether she was in it or not. The relationship we rebuilt was different from the one that had fallen apart. It was more honest, more balanced, more respectful of each other's autonomy and needs. It was stronger because it had been tested, because we had both chosen it freely rather than clinging to it out of fear or habit. Sometimes when we lose someone, the path back to them runs directly through ourselves, through our own healing, our own growth, our own willingness to sit in the discomfort of not knowing, not controlling, not forcing, through our ability to do nothing but trust in the process, trust in ourselves, and if appropriate, trust in the other person's journey. So if you're in that painful place right now, wanting someone who's walking away desperate to close the gap between you, I invite you to consider the power of doing nothing. Not as a tactic or a trick, but as an act of love. Love for yourself, love for them, love for the truth of what is, rather than what you wish could be. Give them the space to miss you. Give yourself the space to remember who you are beyond this relationship. Let go of the outcome. Focus on the journey. Trust that either way, you'll be okay. Better than okay. You'll be stronger, wiser, more capable of genuine connection than you were before. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. And in that nothing, you might just find everything you've been looking for.